Good afternoon, everybody. Doug McGowan, President of Memphis Light, Gas and Water. Yesterday, I expressed cautious optimism that we were heading in the right direction. Today, I actually have good news to report. We have fixed of the broken mains. We have secured the water at enough private Now, there are going to be a few areas of our city that are not at normal pressure just yet. Those are the folks that are at the very end of our water distribution system. Largely, that's going to be in the northern part of our county, in the areas north of Millington and north central part of the county. There's a couple of reasons why they will be last kind of feel full pressure. Number one, it's a much higher elevation, so we have to pump the water uphill to get there. Number two, we have smaller mains in those areas. And number three, we serve those areas with water tanks. You've seen the elevated water tanks. Those serve to increase pressure. But when we had the water crisis, we depleted those tanks. We have to fill them back up. So that's why they'll be last to come on. But I assure you the pressure is building. We are seeing some improvements out in those areas. They'll very likely be the last. We have everybody, all of their, we know that some people have had to turn theirs off because of leaks. We also know that there's a chance that if there's another water main break in the street, we might have to shut water off temporarily while we fix the thing. That could be a short. And so far, our team has found 36 leaks. There's one remaining that we're working on right now. As you know, the temperatures are warming up. As they reach the 50s, we should be completely thawed out, and that's when we'll know if we've had any additional leaks. Just to give you a sense of perspective, it wasn't all that long ago, and we've talked about this. In 2021, February, we had 10 days of extremely cold temperatures. Just told you we had 36 main breaks this time. In 2021, we had 140 main breaks, just to give you a sense of how different this storm is. So, our system pressures are back to normal. It's operating normally. Pressures are building, and people are getting water. The next step is, when will the boil water advisory be lifted? I know that's the question on everybody's mind. I will say no one wants it lifted more than I do, and I want it lifted as soon as we possibly can. So I want to describe the process for how we lift the boil water advisory. First, I have to have full pressure in the system. Once I have full pressure, then my teams can go out and begin to collect samples from across the distribution system. They are already doing that. For areas where I have full pressure, they're collecting samples. For areas that don't yet have full pressure, collect those samples. The next step in the process is we have to process those samples. Now, yesterday I talked about physics. Today I'm going to talk about biology. Once I have those samples collected, I have to put them in an incubator, and they have to remain there for 18 hours. That's so those cultures have the opportunity. If there's any bacteria, they can grow and we can detect it. So it's a fixed period of time. From the time I put them in, I can't do anything for 18 hours until I get those samples out. Now, our very great hope is we're not going to find anything. However, if we do, then we have to go back out and sample again, and then it's another 18 hours. In the very we'll put them in the incubator. 18 hours later, we'll know what our result is. If we see anything that's abnormal, we'll have to sample again, wait another 18 hours. As soon as we get those samples back, we ask the State Department of Energy and Environment and Conservation, TDEC, to validate our results, and then they give us permission to lift the boil water advisory. A few days ago, that's why I said it takes a few days for us to get this done. But that's what the process is. And as soon as we possibly can, we will get that boil water advisory lifted. My aim is to get it For areas where we can, we'll lift it first, and for areas where we're having trouble getting the pressure back up, we have to lift them slightly higher, then we'll do so. But first opportunity to lift, I will do so. So again, we're continuing, because we have that boil water, we're continuing to distribute water to the community. We've done about 4,000 cases so far today. I know we did another 2 locations, one at Iglesia Nueva Vida. I think we just wrapped that up, and another at First Baptist on Broad. We're thankful for those 2 partners to allow us to do it. And again, we've thanked our sponsors, Ajax and Ron Kent, Mayor Harris and Shelby County Office of Emergency Management, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity, Lemoyne Chapter, TVA, and others who have brought water so that we can distribute. We'll plan for another distribution tomorrow. The time and location will be yet to be determined. We'll announce that later this afternoon once we figure that out, and we'll put those details out for you when we know them. That's what I wanted to pass along to you today. I'm sure you have other. And Well, I can't control what Mother Nature does, and I obviously can't control the nature and variability of the breaks that we have in the system. I'll come back to something I said yesterday. We are making investments in our water system. Just since 2020, we put $53 million of infrastructure improvements into our water system. It bears repeating, but if we had not made those investments, many more people would have had low pressure, and many more people would have been without water. So we are making progress.
You said that there were 18, it would take 18 hours, but you do have people out taking samples from full pressure.
Yes, when we get they're in position, when they assess that they are at full pressure at that point in the system. Again, I'm measuring full pressure coming out of the pumping station. They have to go out to the far end of that line, and as soon as it hits full pressure, they are ready to take a sample and bring it back to the laboratory.
Do you have a percentage of how many are potentially at full pressure?
Well, there will be about 36 sample sites, so I don't have a list of how many are at full pressure yet. We've got the team out there ready to go, so I know they're working on that today, and we expect samples to begin coming in this afternoon.
Last question, can you give a message to the people that live in northern Shelby County? You mentioned that they do not have the pressure yet that we're seeing within, closer to Memphis.
Sure.
Who, a lot of them have been without water since the very beginning of this whole incident.
Sure. Well, it's a physics issue, and that's why we have resources out there. We have water towers out there to make sure that we keep the pressure up. When there's a water crisis like this, and when there are leaks in the system, that depletes that ability for that water. That's an extra buffer. Most of the rest of the city is served just by the pressure that we push out of the pumping station. So that is an extra level of protection. It doesn't help them when they're out of water now, except that we are building pressure and we're doing everything we can. I have an army of technicians out in North Shelby County right now, making sure that absolutely everything we can do is being done to make sure that their pressure builds and that they have water.
I'm sorry, you had mentioned 50% of water customers yesterday either had no water or
Sure.
very low pressure. Do we have an updated number of that today?
I haven't done a count. I'm much more interested in getting water back on for everybody, and then I'll count it up later. That was an estimate that we gave based on a sample. Probably had 450 samples that would say here's some areas of low pressure and some reports that we had of no pressure. Again, that's based on people who've called in, and so we made an estimate of 15% on what we heard and what I don't know if that was within plus or minus 5%, but that was our best guess at the time, and obviously we were conservative.
And I know you met with some state lawmakers today. I know one state lawmaker yesterday saying he wants the state to replace the aging system. I know people are weighing in with their own dialogue right now. Do you have any responses to what some of the state lawmakers are wanting in your discussions with them?
Well, I think we all want the same thing, and we talked about this yesterday. We all want reliable utilities that we don't have to think about. I think, quite frankly, everybody's probably tired of seeing me here, and they shouldn't have to see me here because they can just go about living their lives without having to worry about it. When you flick the switch, the lights come on. When you turn on the kitchen sink, the water comes out. And when you hit the furnace, the thermostat up, the furnace comes on. You don't want to have to think about the services that we have. Unfortunately, that means sometimes it doesn't get the attention that we seek, and the only time it gets attention is when there's a desire for a rate increase, and people say, wait a minute, why are you raising my rates? Or when you're writing that check every month. I understand that too. So we have the same thing. We do have, thankfully, because of the rate increase in 2018, we have a funding stream of $1.2 billion to make investments in our electrical, gas, and water system. It's about $800 million we have programmed into our electrical, and much of that is underway. About $228 million into our water system, and about another $130 in our gas system. So about $1.2 billion to be spent between now and 2027. As I mentioned, about $53 million of that has already been spent on our water out of that 228. The other thing I want to mention is that this is an opportunity. As you know, the federal government is very interested in investing in infrastructure. Our governor, Bill Lee, is interested in investing in infrastructure, and we're already seeing some of that money flow through to us. On top of the investments I just mentioned, we have received a grant for just about $35 million to help upgrade our water infrastructure. So now we're pushing $300 million, and we're not done. There are other formulary grants that will be coming out from the federal government, meaning based on your percentage of population, you'll get this much money. And then there are other discretionary grants that you have to apply for. So we have already applied for about another $60 million of discretionary grants. And as soon as they notify us that we're able to apply, we will be applying for others. So I don't have a forecast on exactly how those will be brought out and what exactly they could be used for, but we're looking for every opportunity to bring money to this community to upgrade our infrastructure.
So when you hear state lawmakers say, we want to intervene with funding, would you all welcome that? Or would you want more state funding? I know obviously
and to us here at Memphis Light, Gas, and Water, actually through the city of Memphis. So I want to share all that information. I've talked to city council members, I've talked to Shelby County commissioners, and today I talked to just a few of the state lawmakers, just to share that information so they know what is happening. And I assured them if there is something they can do for us, if there is a gap in our 5-year plan, we will evaluate that, and we'll let them know that there is a need that we haven't identified yet. Obviously, after the electrical issues, the rolling blackouts, and after, which were obviously caused by our provider, not the winter storm, it was the first ever time that's happened, but if there is a gap in any of our improvement plans, electric, gas, or water, we'll be reevaluating that and saying, here's another need that we have, and we'll work to find resources to fill those gaps.
So in the best case scenario, if nothing is found in the samples, when will the boil advisory be lifted?
Again, yesterday, I'm not going to give you a specific time, but we'll start getting samples back this afternoon, and so at least 18 hours, that means that we're at least into tomorrow sometime, so I would suggest another day is a reasonable expectation for where we are.
And what are you looking for in the samples? What's like the worst thing that you might find?
Well, it's all the standard bacteria that you could find. There's, and I'll probably get the name wrong, but I know E. coli is one of those bacteria that we sample for. There's other coliforms that we sample for, and there's a whole myriad of those kinds of things. It's basically the things that you might find if you were, you don't want to drink out of a stream because it has little bacteria in there. It's the same kinds of bacteria you might find in nature, and we don't want to have that in our water that's treated because it can cause some obviously discomfort and sickness in human beings, and we don't want that. Again, I want to reemphasize, we have not found any of that in our normal sampling, but that's what we're testing for, and that's what we have to prove before we can lift the boil water. Sam?
I'm good.
Okay, very good. Very
What
good.
about those vacant commercial buildings where you said you had a lot of those leaks out of the sprinkler systems?
Yes.
What about those?
Well, so far our team has secured 44 water to 44 of those facilities that had fire protection breaks. That's a lot. And one of the lessons we've already learned here is how do we make sure that our commercial property owners can surveil their properties, especially in periods of absence. You know, this was the perfect storm. The temperature drop happened the day before Christmas Eve, and Christmas Day. Largely nobody in these to monitor. And as I mentioned, these fire protection systems are not metered. Well, why aren't they metered? Because typically you don't want water running through them, and it's expensive to put a meter there. So we don't have the ability remotely to determine if there is water flowing from those. we have to rely on the business owner or people going by noticing there's water coming out. So we'll work with local business owners, the Chamber of Commerce, to see if there's a way we can do better there to get some earlier surveillance. We have made some investments in downrange monitoring of pressure on our water mains so that we can detect what happens. That's part of our 5-year plan, and that's part of the investments that we're making. And we've done that. We started in and around the hospitals because they're the most critical, but we'll also be rolling more of that out. Any other questions?
Not every sports fan came to the city with water in their hotel rooms. We met a couple guys on field who said they had beer, but no water. Any word to the sports fan visiting the city? Well,
we hope you have an awesome opportunity to witness a good game, but experience our great city. It's never something that we want to do. I want to express some thanks to the hospitality partners that we have, because our hotels came together when and where one hotel had water and another didn't. They were putting up guests from another hotel to make sure that our fans had the best possible experience. It's never going to be optimal. Sounds like those guys had their priorities right. They were on Beale Street and enjoying a beer, but I'm sorry that they didn't have the water they expected in their hotel. Most of the pressures are being restored so folks can get a shower and that kind of thing, which is part of the experience as well. So we're sorry for the interruption, but I think the game went on last night at the FedEx Forum. The game is going to go on this afternoon, although with some changes to how they operate. That's largely because of the number of fire protection breaks that happened in the Liberty Bowl.
Doug, just my coworker was asking, she's hearing that there's some residents in one part of Memphis that had leaks and water issues a month prior to the storm. They said they had tickets, but they haven't had those leaks repaired. Is there any comment you have with that?
I'll have to look at that, because we work, again, thousands of tickets at a time. Well, like I said, yesterday we worked 980, and we had another 200 come in, and then there are hundreds of calls. Our customer service agents field, sometimes thousands of calls a day. So without looking at that specific one, I wouldn't have an answer. But it's an ongoing issue. Anytime the water, even when the weather is good, sometimes there's just a break. So many times the connections that we have is cast iron, and they have a PVC, and where those two materials meet, expansion can happen at different rates, and suddenly you have a water break.
Well, Les, I guess there is a question. When is the earliest any of the cultures are actually going to get into the incubator? Are any already in the incubator?
I don't know if they're, like I say, the earliest forecast we had was that our teams would be bringing them back to the laboratory this afternoon. So they're all out in the field waiting for pressures to come up. And so we anticipate this afternoon that we'll have some of those pressures at a point where they can take the sample, and then our lab folks are standing by to get that ready to process.
But you don't know of any specific spots where the pressure is at full capacity right now?
Right at this very moment, I do not. But
you just expect it to be by the end of the day?
Right. Because of the pressure, certain parts of the system have had full pressure for longer than others, and I expect that there will be full pressure this afternoon in a number of areas that we can get those samples in.
Is there a possibility that you'll lift the advisory in certain areas
Yes.
before others, or do you wait for all samples to come back clear before you lift it?
We will lift it where we can and when we can. So I understand that there's two options here. I could wait for everything to come in and lift it all at one time, but I'm trying to help as many people as I can as soon as I possibly can. I think if someone disagrees with that decision, it rests with me, but I'd like to do that where I can, when I can. And I'm picking it based on, again, the physics of it. Where does the pressure come up? Let's take that sample, bring it back, and let's get that area back on. They will not be very discrete areas. Just to be clear, it'll be very large areas that we're turning back on.
And just to reiterate, so you're saying 1 to 2 days realistically could be a timeline when boil water pressure is lifted? That's
Assuming, again,
assuming everything goes well.
as long as I don't find something and have to retest again for another 18 hours, I mean, if I had to do it twice, that's 36 hours before I have an answer. So.
And to go back to the neighborhood question, like let's say you find a bad sample in one neighborhood but not another, would one neighborhood be allowed to lift the boil advisory? Is that how you're looking?
Okay, we're getting real deep on that question. It's an excellent one, and it's really going to depend on if those neighborhoods are interconnected in some way and what the level of risk is. There could be cross-contamination. So it's pretty specific. I'd have to look at the system to see where that happened, to see how close they are, to see if we can lift in one and not the other.
And you mentioned, you compared February 2021 to now.
Yes.
Can you give an estimate on how much the city spent on infrastructure
Well, the water system specifically, we spent $53 million between 2020 and 2022. I'll say approximately half of that was after the 2021 timeframe. So, and just to come back, we started at the source, upgrading our wells. That was part of the problem, and the up and lubricate, weren't able to pump. Our had that allowed us to get water out of the ground, push more water out into the system. We wouldn't have been able to do that without those upgrades. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So Mark White floated the idea with the legislative session coming up that you might push for legislation to get suburban representatives on board for MLGW. Do you think in the future having those representatives could alleviate issues like we're seeing right now in one part of the county?
Well, I've been speaking with many of our elected officials about representation, I think, and I'm not trying to be flippant here, but you can have 100% representation and still not get the outcomes that you want. I think all of our folks know that. You know, sometimes the votes go your way and they don't. I've told the suburban mayors when I met with them, I'm interested in outcomes for their communities. I'm interested in meeting the outcomes that they seek, and that's the most important thing to me. It's a little longer process to talk about whether there's representation, voting representation on the board. And pragmatically, I'm just more interested in getting outcomes right now. I think that will play out. Understanding what the priorities are for those communities is most important to me, so I can help them meet them.
And a reporter asked yesterday, I think, he just asked for your assurance that we wouldn't see customers with outrageous leaks. Can you still provide that assurance today?
Sure. Well, let me come back to some data on because the question was really about people dripping their water, right? Hey, are we going to see an outrageous bill there? And we did some calculations, and for a moderately large home, if you were to drip your water, more than just a drip, but actually run it at several of your spigots, we think the maximum impact would be 55 cents on your water bill. So we don't think that dripping is going to have a material impact on anybody's bill. For folks that have dramatic leaks, they would have likely called that into us and said, hey, we've had a massive leak. We can always make adjustments. We do occasionally, I know the sewer team does, when people have a big event like filling their swimming pool, they'll give them an adjustment. But we'll be taking a look at that. I don't believe anybody's going to have an outrageous bill. That's certainly not our intent here.
For customers who have not had water since last Friday, Saturday, whatever, will they still be charged that daily base rate?
They'll be charged for the water they use. That's it.
I had a viewer email in. They said that the representative with MLGW told them that they would still be charged that base rate, even if they did not have running water that day.
Okay, I'll have to check into that because I don't know exactly how that works, to be honest. I just don't. I'll have our team check on that and get back to you, but that's an area I need to learn a little bit more about. Any other questions? All right, y'all, thanks.